Chapter 6. Trolls and Teasing. Halloween at Hogwarts had everything Harry had ever secretly wished for in a holiday. Floating pumpkins bobbed under the enchanted ceiling, candles glowed like fireflies, and the great hall smelt gloriously of roast turkey and treacle tart. Bats fluttered overhead in great black drifts. The tables groaned under the weight of food Aunt Petunia would have fainted at the sight of. Tom sprawled on the Gryffindor bench beside Harry, a blissful, gravy-damp puddle of cat. Jerry lay on his back on Harry's plate, arms over his full belly, eyes glazed with contentment. A single pumpkin pasty crumb balanced on his nose. "This," Harry said around a mouthful of roast potato, "is perfect." Ron, equally stuffed, waved a drumstick. "Best thing about Hogwarts, this food, magic." "No, Dudley. Oh, and classes, I suppose," he added, as Hermione's eyes narrowed from across the table. Hermione sat a bit apart, stiff-backed, poking at her dinner. Tom and Jerry had noticed she'd been quiet ever since Ron and Harry had laughed about her earlier, after Charms. "She's a nightmare, honestly," Ron had said in the corridor. "No wonder she hasn't got any friends." The words had stung her badly. They could see that now, in the way she kept her gaze fixed on her plate, lips pressed tight. Jerry, watching her, slapped Ron's sleeve sharply. "Ow!" Ron complained, rubbing his arm. Jerry pointed one tiny paw at Hermione's hunched shoulders, then at Ron's face, then made a big, exaggerated, sad mask, dragging his whiskers down with his fingers. Ron flushed. "Yeah, well, she was being bossy," he muttered, but he didn't sound as sure of himself as before. Tom flicked a pea at his forehead. Ron glared. "Traitors, the lot of you!" The noise of the feast swelled, happy and carefree. Then Professor Quirrell staggered into the hall. "Troll, in the dungeons!" he gasped, clinging to the tablecloth. "Thought you ought to know!" He collapsed in a heap. For one heartbeat there was perfect silence. Then the hall erupted. Screams, shouts, scraping benches. Tom shot bolt upright, fur puffed out like he'd touched a vanishing cabinet full of static. Jerry flipped from his back to his feet in one fluid motion, whiskers quivering. "Troll?" Harry whispered. He'd heard Hagrid mention trolls once, and it hadn't sounded like adorable grey creature you could pet. Dumbledore's voice boomed over the chaos. "Silence!" The words shook the candles. "Prefects, lead your houses back to the dormitories immediately," McGonagall snapped. The Gryffindors were herded out, chattering fearfully. Tom clung to Harry's shoulder, tail like a bottle brush. Jerry perched at Harry's collar, eyes darting everywhere, mentally listing all the things in a castle a troll could knock over. It was a long list. Ron hustled along beside Harry as they climbed the stairs. Then Hermione's empty place at the table flickered into Harry's mind. He stopped so suddenly that Jerry nearly catapulted off his shoulder. "Hermione," Harry said. "She doesn't know. She's in the bathroom." Ron's face went pale. Oh no!" Tom, instincts ignoring all school rules about staying put, jabbed Harry's cheek frantically and pointed down a side corridor. Jerry, already nodding, mimed a stick-figure Hermione, a troll with a club, and then a cartoonish gravestone. He crossed his arms in an emphatic no. "We've got to tell her," Harry said. "And get her out," Ron added, with the air of someone who'd only just realized the size of the troll in question. Without another word to Percy, who was bellowing, "Back this way, Gryffindor!" they ducked out of line down the nearest side passage. Tom and Jerry were right with them. They ran. The castle, which had seemed friendly and warm before, now loomed with shadows and corners where a troll could be lurking. Hollow echoes bounced off stone walls. Somewhere below there was a muffled crash and a distant roar that made Tom's tail kink. They found Hermione in the girls' bathroom, exactly where they feared she'd be. She'd been crying. When the door burst open, she wheeled around, eyes red, wand clutched in shaking hands. "What are you doing here?" she demanded, voice wobbling between anger and hurt. Harry gulped. "There's a troll in the dungeons. We thought you ought to know. They're moving everyone back to the dorms. We have to get you out of here." Hermione's face drained of colour. "A troll? Here?" A new sound cut through her words. A deep, earthy grunting. Heavy, thudding footsteps, and something else, like an entire cupboard of pots being dragged badly over stone. The troll. All four of them turned toward the bathroom door at the same time. It creaked, splintered, then burst inward with a crash as something enormous and grey-skinned shouldered its way through, club scraping the ceiling. The troll was disgusting, easily 12 feet tall, with skin like lumpy stone, a small bald head perched on a thick necklace body, and a club the size of a tree trunk dragging behind it. Its smell hit them like a slap, damp, stale, and wrong. Hermione screamed. Ron froze. Harry's heart nearly burst out of his chest. Tom's eyes bulged. Every fur on his body tried to leave. For a fraction of a second, his instinct screamed at him to run to the highest point of the castle and never come down. Jerry swallowed hard. Then something in the tiny mouse that had outwitted Spike the dog for years snapped into place. This was just a bigger Spike, with a club. Fine. The troll lumbered in, squinting around dumbly. It didn't seem to see them as much as sense movement. Harry hissed, "In the stalls!" They scattered. Harry and Ron dove under sinks. Hermione ducked into a locked cubicle. Tom shot up onto a broken pipe above the stalls and clung there, claws digging in. Jerry zipped along the wall, his brain already drawing a diagram of the bathroom. Sinks, pipes, loose tiles, puddles, flimsy doors, troll. He saw the troll's foot come down, crushing a sink. Another step, closer to Hermione's stall. "Harry," Jerry breathed, his voice unheard, but his urgency very clear as he tugged Harry's sleeve. "Do something, do something, do!" Harry grabbed a tap and wrenched it open, then shouted, "Oi, troll!" Ron scrabbled around frantically for something, anything to throw. His hand closed on a loose pipe. He hurled it. It clanged off the troll's head. The troll blinked, then turned, confused and enraged. The fight that followed was wild, messy, and mostly instinct. Harry and Ron darted around like two slightly panicked, underarmed gnats. Hermione, trapped in the cubicle, ducked as the troll smashed blindly at the stalls. Tom, his fear overridden by fierce protectiveness, dropped from his high pipe straight onto the troll's back. He clambered up its rough skin, claws scrabbling, and yanked hard on its tufted ear. The troll roared, swiping at its own head. Tom ducked. Its own hand smacked its skull with a meaty thump. Stars practically spun over its head. Jerry saw the club swing perilously close to Harry's skull and launched. He sprinted up the club itself, tiny claws finding purchase in the wood, and when it swung back, he leapt onto the troll's warty nose. The troll's eyes crossed to look at him. Jerry took a deep breath and slapped its nose with both paws, hard. It wasn't enough to hurt, it was enough to surprise. The troll yelped, stumbled, and brought the club down too hard, smashing the floor instead of a student. Harry and Ron's wands flashed. "Wingardium Leviosa!" Ron shouted, finally pronouncing it right. The club rose. The troll looked up, astonished, as its weapon hovered over its head, then crashed down. When the dust settled, the troll lay sprawled on the floor, unconscious. Bits of ceiling drifted down like very unfortunate snow. Hermione peeked over the edge of the shattered cubicle. Tom dropped lightly from the troll's back and landed, shaking, on Harry's shoulder. Jerry slid down the troll's arm and collapsed dramatically on Harry's head, panting. They'd done it. Somehow. Boots thundered moments later. Professors burst into the bathroom, McGonagall, Quirrell, and, of course, glamour-cursed Snape, robes and hair perfectly in place, even in troll-smashed chaos. There was a terrifying few minutes of shouting, explanations, and house-point loss and gain. Hermione, voice small but steady, lied to protect Harry and Ron. Harry's chest tightened as he realized she was taking the blame, calling them heroes. McGonagall, stern but undeniably impressed, marched them back to Gryffindor Tower after issuing lectures and detentions. By the time Harry, Ron, Hermione, Tom, and Jerry collapsed into the common room's soft armchairs, adrenaline fading, it had fully hit. They had fought a troll together, and survived. That sort of thing changes people, and mice, and cats. Hermione clutched her books to her chest, still a bit shaken. "You didn't have to come after me," she said, voice soft. "You could have gone with everyone else." Harry shook his head. "You would have done the same for us." Ron nodded, ears pink. "Yeah, obviously." Silence settled for a beat. The fire crackled. Older students chattered in the background about the troll, Snape, and the smell in the girls' bathroom now. Tom looked from Harry to Hermione to Ron. He had seen human friendships form before, from the cupboard crack, watching Dudley's gang. Those had been loud, cruel, and temporary. This felt different. Jerry must have felt it too. He studied Hermione's face, then Ron's. "Ah," his little eyes said, "there it is, the beginning of something big." But Jerry was Jerry. He also saw something else. When Hermione looked at Ron, just for a second, her gaze softened, the tiniest bit. Maybe she didn't even know she was doing it. Maybe it was just gratitude. Ron, catching that look, turned the colour of a ripe tomato and immediately went back to picking invisible fluff off his robe with furious concentration. Jerry's whiskers twitched. Oh, this was going to be fun. The next morning at breakfast, the great hall buzzed with troll gossip. Harry, Ron, and Hermione sat together at the Gryffindor table. Hermione's eyes were a little puffy, but she was talking to them. Ron, still slightly bewildered that they'd all nearly been squished and now were sharing toast like nothing had happened, kept sneaking glances at her when he thought she wasn't looking. Tom noticed. Jerry noticed. Hermione reached for the jam. Ron passed it without her asking. Jerry's pupils turned into tiny, mischievous stars. He whipped around in Harry's lap, grabbed Tom by the cheeks, and yanked his face close. Tom spluttered silently. Jerry then proceeded to demonstrate his plan. He squished his own face up into an outrageous kissy expression, eyes half-lidded, lashes fluttering, lips exaggerated like a cartoon heart. He clasped his paws under his chin, tilted his head, and made loud, theatrical smacking motions. Tom's jaw dropped. Then his eyes gleamed. He liked this plan. He liked it a lot. Hermione, oblivious, was saying something about revising charms. Ron was trying and failing to think about anything other than the way her hair curled at the edges. Tom leapt up onto the bench behind Ron and Hermione, out of their line of sight, but perfectly visible to Harry. He drew in a huge, dramatic breath. Then, with all the subtlety of a fireworks display, he made the most over-the-top kissy face Harry had ever seen. He puckered his lips until they could have sucked up a pumpkin pasty from 2 feet away. His eyes grew heavy-lidded. He clasped his paws over his heart, swaying side to side, hearts practically popping out of his fur. Jerry joined. He jumped beside Tom and mirrored him, but smaller and even more ridiculous. He pressed his cheeks together, making them puff, then shaped his paws into a giant heart and held it over his chest, wiggling his eyebrows at Ron. Ron, mid-bite of sausage, happened to glance sideways and nearly choked. "What?" he spluttered, coughing. Hermione looked concerned. "Are you all right?" Ron, terrified she might turn and see the spectacle behind her, shook his head too vehemently. "Fine, I'm fine. Wrong pipe." His ears were such a brilliant shade of red they could have guided ships to shore. Harry's shoulders shook. He stared hard at his cereal to avoid catching anyone's eye. Tom wasn't done. He upped the performance. He grabbed Jerry and twirled him in a clumsy little waltz, lifting one paw high, the other pressed dramatically to his heart. Jerry went limp like a swooning lover, back of his paw to his forehead, eyes rolled theatrically. Then Tom dipped him, deep, right behind Hermione's back. Jerry fluttered his lashes in slow motion. Ron made a strangled sound, halfway between a squeak and a groan. Hermione frowned. "Do you need to go to the hospital wing?" No, Ron wheezed. "Just ate a pea wrong." Tom and Jerry continued. Any time Hermione turned her head, they froze, instantly transforming into portraits of innocence. Tom would groom his paw. Jerry would pretend to be deeply engrossed in a crumb. The moment she looked away, it resumed. Kissy faces, lip-smacking, paws forming hearts, Tom repeatedly pointing at Hermione, then at Ron, then smooshing his paws together with a wicked wiggle of his eyebrows. At one point, Jerry climbed onto Tom's shoulders, turned toward Ron, and, making eye contact with him the whole time, very deliberately puckered up and blew a slow-motion silent kiss that arced through the air with an imaginary sparkle trail. Ron's fork clattered to the plate. "What?" Hermione snapped, startled. "What is it now?" "Nothing," Ron yelped, voice an octave too high. Harry nearly fell off the bench laughing. The teasing did not stop at breakfast. Once Tom and Jerry had discovered this new game, it became their favourite sport. In the library, while Hermione tutored them on levitation charms, Tom would stretch himself along the back of the armchair behind Ron and, whenever Hermione bent over Ron's shoulder to point at a line in his notes, make painfully slow, exaggerated smooching motions at the back of Ron's head. Jerry, perched on the edge of the table, would press his paws to his cheeks, eyes turning into little cartoon hearts, and mime a heartbeat pounding out of his chest whenever Ron and Hermione's heads were even remotely close. If Hermione brushed Ron's hand while passing a quill, Tom and Jerry both dropped to the floor in identical fainting fits, limbs splayed, tiny ghost spirits practically floating out of their mouths. Ron noticed every single thing. Hermione noticed exactly none of it, which somehow made it even worse for Ron. In the common room, when Hermione came over to review homework, Ron would start out relaxed, slouched on the sofa. Then Hermione would sit down a bit nearer. Jerry's head popped up over the back of the sofa like a periscope. He made two tiny hands kiss each other repeatedly. Ron inched away. Hermione frowned. "Am I squashing you?" "No," Ron squeaked. "You're fine, completely fine. Why wouldn't you be fine?" Tom, sitting on the mantelpiece, pretended to shoot Cupid arrows, little imaginary darts that he mimed flying toward Ron. When one hit, Ron jumped as if actually struck and knocked over his ink bottle. "You're so clumsy," Hermione said, exasperated but fond. Jerry pointed both paws at Ron, then put them over his eyes and made a melting motion, as if his brain were dripping out of his ears from embarrassment. It wasn't just Harry who enjoyed the show. The twins caught on quickly. One evening, Fred found Jerry in the common room, making his now classic kissy face at a blushing Ron, who was trying unsuccessfully to concentrate on his potions essay while Hermione corrected his spelling. Fred watched for a moment, then called across the room in a falsely casual voice, "Aye, Ron, do you need us to leave you alone with your study partner?" Ron's quill snapped in half. Hermione blinked. Why would he? Oh, honestly, Fred, grow up. Tom and Jerry simultaneously swooned and fell off the arm of the sofa. "Subtle," George murmured appreciatively to them as he passed. The teasing took on new forms. In the courtyard on a chilly afternoon, the trio huddled around a table under the grey sky, sharing a single scarf between them. Hermione had insisted they go over Transfiguration again. Ron pretended to complain, but didn't object too much when Hermione fussed with his scarf, tugging it tighter around his neck. Tom perched on the stone ledge, eyebrows raised. Jerry saw the scarf tug and nearly dislocated his jaw with his smooching face. He grabbed Tom's tail and wrapped it around both of them like a shawl, then squished himself up against Tom and made loud, sloppy kissing motions, winking furiously at Ron. Tom, improvising, fluttered his paws at his cheeks and then pretended to faint into Jerry's arms again, paws dramatically angled. Ron choked on nothing. Harry wheezed into his sleeve. "Seriously, you two," Ron hissed later in the dormitory, as Tom sprawled on his pillow and Jerry sat smugly on his trunk. "You've got to stop doing that." Tom put on a display of injured innocence, paw to heart. Jerry mimed a halo over his head, then promptly snapped it and formed it into a heart shape, which he held up between his paws and shoved in Ron's face. Ron went scarlet again. "You're ridiculous." They did not stop. Any excuse would do. Hermione leaning over Ron to look at his herbology book, kissy faces. Hermione handing Ron a quill because his had burst, kissy faces. Hermione laughing at a joke Ron made in the common room, nuclear-level kissy faces. Tom clutching his own heart and rolling on the rug, Jerry pretending his cheeks were literally on fire. Even Harry wasn't safe. One afternoon, Hermione and Harry bent their heads close together over a complicated homework problem. Ron watched from his armchair, chewing the end of his quill, eyebrows drawn. Tom caught his expression and filed it away for future mischief. He and Jerry exchanged a look. Very slowly, very dramatically, they turned toward Ron and, in perfect unison, made their biggest, most exaggerated kissy faces yet, waggling their eyebrows, clutching their fur, fluttering their eyelashes. Ron's jaw dropped. They're doing it to me now?" he hissed to himself. "Doing what?" Hermione asked absently, still scribbling. "Nothing." There were, of course, a few close calls. Once Jerry got so into his routine, standing on the table, paws to his cheeks, wagging his tail in big heart-shaped loops, that he didn't notice Hermione's gaze following Ron's line of sight to him. She blinked. "Is Jerry all right?" Jerry froze mid-pucker. Tom, thinking fast, hurled himself across the table, tackled Jerry, and started furiously fake-performing chest compressions, miming, "Mouse heart attack, very serious, do not look any closer." Hermione gasped, "Oh, is he?" Jerry's eyes popped open. He saw that Hermione was watching, and, in a flash of survival instinct, flopped his tongue out and let his limbs dangle. Tom thumped his chest with unnecessary force. Jerry shot back up, gasping, then staggered around dramatically, shaking himself. Hermione clapped a hand to her heart. "Poor thing! Maybe you've been giving him too many sweets, Harry." Ron and Harry stared at each other, containing explosions of laughter. Tom and Jerry sagged in relief. "Close one," Jerry mouthed, wiping imaginary sweat from his brow. And yet, under all the teasing, something else had settled in. The troll incident had glued the trio together. They studied together, ate together, got lost together, mocked Percy together, hid from Peeves together. Tom and Jerry, who had spent years being Harry's only real friends, watched this new shape forming around him with a wary kind of tenderness. Harry was happier. His laugh came easier now. He didn't glance around at every joke to see if someone would punish him for it. He had people, 2 human someones and 2 silent someones, who would stand in front of trolls for him, or behind him, or dance ridiculously off to the side for him. One quiet evening after lights out, Harry lay awake listening to the soft breathing of the other boys. Moonlight spilled through the window. Tom curled on his chest, a warm, vibrating weight. Jerry sat tucked under Harry's chin resting on his tiny paws. Harry exhaled, the day's events drifting lazily through his mind. Classes, Neville's disastrous attempt at transfiguration, Hermione's laugh at one of his jokes, Ron's splutter when Tom and Jerry had done their 10th kissy routine of the day. Harry's lips curved in the dark. "Do you think they'll ever, figure it out?" he whispered. Tom cracked one eye and tilted his head. Jerry lifted his head too. "Ron and Hermione," Harry clarified. "You know, that you two think they, He trailed off, suddenly shy of saying it out loud, even in the emptiness of the dormitory. Jerry's eyes went soft. He turned to look at the bed over, where Ron flopped in sleep, one arm slung over his face, foot poking out from under the covers. Then he glanced up, through the bed curtains, in the vague direction of the girls' dorm, mind's eye imagining Hermione asleep with a book half open on her chest. He sighed. Then he smiled. He slowly formed a big heart with his paws again, held it up to Harry, and then stretched it wider and wider until his paws were as far apart as they could go, as if to say, "It's big, it'll get there." Tom snorted in a fond sort of way and batted lightly at Jerry's paws, knocking the heart out of shape. Then he nudged Harry's chin with his head, purring. Harry closed his eyes. He'd started this year in a cupboard under the stairs, his only comfort the quiet mischief of a cat and a mouse. Now he had a castle, a house, 2 best friends who could talk, and 2 best friends who made exaggerated kissy faces behind those friends' backs. It was ridiculous. It was perfect. As he drifted off, a muffled thump came from Ron's bed, followed by a sleepy, half-mumbled, "No, Fred, I am not in love with Hermione, shut up," before the snores resumed. Tom and Jerry looked at each other across Harry's chest and grinned identical wicked grins. Tomorrow the teasing would continue. Tomorrow and the next day and the next. After all, some stories took time to unfold. And if, along the way, a pair of silent pranksters filled the in-between with hearts, kissy faces and overacted swoons, well, that was just their way of saying they believed in happy endings.